Welcome to the American Medical Extended Reality Member Question and Answer Series. In this series, we'll be highlighting the incredibly diverse and talented AMXRA community, one interview at a time. Join me, Dr. Mark Zhang, founder and president of AMXRA, as we learn more about medical extended reality through the perspective of AMXRA members. Hello. Well, welcome everyone to the very first Faces of the American Medical Extended Reality Association. I am Mark Zhang, your host, and I have with me Dr. Korak Sarkar, who is a neurologist focused in the rehabilitation space at Ochsner. Well, first, maybe we can just start with just a more kind of thorough introduction than I just gave. Tell us about yourself, Dr. Sarkar.
Definitely. And first, Mark, thank you for this opportunity, as well as your leadership in AMXRA. I think it's timely. There's a lot of people that were yearning for this, and I'm sure we'll get to why this is such a great moment for the genesis of an organization like this. Yeah, my background, my day job is as a neurologist. I completed a neurology residency at UC Davis, and then did a PM&R fellowship in Chicago. I joke that the artist formerly known as RIC, it's called the Shirley Ability Institute now, and spent a year there doing a clinical fellowship in brain injury medicine, which engendered, what is basically about 50% of my time now, my clinical work. And my clinical mission is functional optimization and community reintegration for individuals that have suffered a neurological insult, mostly brain injury. I have a civilian practice at Ochsner, and then I also have the privilege of serving those who have served through the VA in New Orleans. Then after that clinical fellowship, there had been some latent interest personally, professionally in policy and innovation, biodesign. And so I stuck around in Chicago to spend an extra year doing basically a biodesign fellowship through Northwestern. Learned, yeah, it was a hard sell to my partner and to my family. I'm going to spend a year doing what exactly when I've been training for decades at that point to be a physician. And I think it's probably debatable on the concrete ROI, but it was a wonderful transforming experience. It kind of led to the work in medical extended reality. Initially, we were chatting about there's a lot of overlap between neurology and rehabilitation, but there's also this sort of gap, and one of the gaps was imaging. And so, being a neurologist with PM&R docs. In training, like I had spent the 10,000 hours, I wasn't necessarily a 10th degree, black belt in reading MRIs or CT scans, but I knew my way around, and there was an obvious disconnect between my understanding and definitely my peers and other trainees, and even the staff. That's just not they knew things about range of motion and how to work with therapists that I'm still learning, but looking at MRIs of the brain was something I spent some time doing. And it was around the time when 3D printing was really emerging.
Yeah.
And I had never used the 3D printer. I don't even know if I'd seen one at that point, but I was, millennial gusto, hold my juice box. I'll just go YouTube this and I'll figure it out. And that started my journey that, led to a lot of things, but including my interest in medical extended reality, because 3D printing has gotten a lot less finicky and less capital intensive and space intensive, but it's a lot still. And it made sense to expand into more, less things that had less footprint, but that delivered the same, if not, better experiences. And at this point, I was coming down to New Orleans, and it's still kind of unfortunately well-kept secret, but New Orleans is like a video game epicenter. It punches way above its weight.
The first time we talked, you were telling me this, and it blew my mind. It's awesome.
Yeah,
I feel saying this out loud now, more people will know, and the secret is out.
I hope so. Because it's done great for our ecosystem, and I think it's done wonders for that sector. And
Yeah.
one of the so not knowing how to 3D print, not even know how to use a 3D printer, I went, just started talking to people. One of the individuals I came across in the Chicago ecosystem was when working at a 3D printing startup, and really understood how to convert medical imaging into these 3D printing formats. He was just answering all these questions that I had, answering questions that I didn't know that I should have. And I was like, hey man, like, how do you know all this stuff? I mean, he was younger
Yeah.
than me at the time, and he was like, oh, I come from the video game industry. And I have what I would have called like a bad poker face. I was like incredulous. I'm like, man, I'm like a doctor. We're doing real things like the video game
Right.
space. And he read that real quick, and he was basically like, you guys in medicine are like decades behind, like you're playing N64 and we're like on PlayStation 4. Like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
guys are behind. And it really, it resonated with me in a way that I was like, okay, I can't even forget this if I tried, but it wasn't really actionable. I was finishing up training. And then I came down to New Orleans, and there was this community, and I did what any good doctor. I used the Mizzle Dizzle. I just started going to meetups,
Yep.
and as it turns out, I'm a dimensionalist. Like I like 2D video games. I grew up on them, but there was this growing and continually growing scene for extended reality, mixed reality, VR and AR, and started jamming with a few people there, and they helped me create a prototype of visualizing in stereoscopy with VR, the 3D printing models, and that became a lot more accessible. And you know, as we've evolved, we've understood like keep it simple, right? Like a web-based 3D viewer is the way to get entree, and then really understanding from a rigorous perspective, where does it help to have a holographic display? Where does it help to actually have a 3D printer? And I think that's definitely part of it, like these technologies
Yeah.
that are really important and really powerful. And I'm as guilty of this as any nerd, like the nerd sirens. Like, why did I start with 3D printing? As I've learned
Right.
10 years later, it wasn't the best solution or the most efficient way to go about it.
But it's
Because
pretty
I'm like, oh,
cool.
it's pretty cool.
Right. Yeah.
And the cognitive neuroscientist in me is like, okay, and the scientist, just to be rigor and pragmatic, is like, all right, well, I got to justify, are these really toys or tools?
Yeah.
And like any good question, the answer is it depends. And like that's
Right.
been particularly the last couple of years with the master's program with Brennan. But what I can find solace in, and with that I didn't have for a long period of time, was like, all right, why VR? Why are we, why stereoscopy? And it's, it was right in front of my eyes, literally. I'm a cognitive neuroscientist. Like, you're a clinician. We are literally eloquently designed to efficiently and effectively consume three-dimensional visual information in a way that we are not in 2D planes. Like, I love Michael Phelps, amazing swimmer, probably the best our species has produced, and we're probably being generous, but you and I could probably walk faster than he can swim 100 meters, and no one would confuse us for being amazing athletes. It's just we're designed a certain way to ambulate.
Right.
We're not designed to swim. We're designed to consume three-dimensional information in a way that is, that's why this visceral simian instinct is so powerful. Holding my AirPods and like moving it around. There's a little bit of stereognosis as well, but it's really visual and haptic, and the integration of that information that is so potent. And so now it's like, all right, we're using these tools not because they're cool, but because they allow us to leverage this innate ability to really, exquisitely consume three-dimensional stereoscopic information in a way that 2D planes, you and I could spend another residency doing neuroradiology, and we're still not as good as we think we are, compiling 2D planes into three dimensions.
I really like the way that you kind of laid out the question, which is, are these toys or tools? And it sounds like you've kind of gone through just an incredible journey. First of all, your pathway into this space has been a pretty wild one, if I say so myself. And it sounds like you're not only are you a clinician, but you're doing this work. You're still working in using kind of 3D printing right now. Is that right? Like, what are you doing with 3D printing now?
Yeah, great question. And so, yeah, we are. And what I wouldn't even call it a research question because that would probably make it more mature than it is at this point. But this research conceit in its nascency is that thing like medical extended reality will be amazing for visualization and will serve as a bridge into simulation. But at the end of the day, particularly for procedures, the simulation is going to require haptic feedback, physiological modeling, blood flow. And I mean, the latter, maybe not, that's not where 3D printing is, but like if you want to build an aneurysm and see how it's going to clip or how you're going to stent it, I think there probably to a degree is some benefit with medical extended reality, but more of that is for understanding and visualizing the anatomy and the geometry, and additive and advanced manufacturing tools will be helpful for simulation. And then, you know, the aspirational goal is digital fabrication, right? You know, how do we make your personalized, you know, God forbid you have an aneurysm, that clip that just can be placed in a way that doesn't disrupt tissue and like most effectively and efficiently for you, reconciles that lesion, and using that whole pipeline together to create that. I mean, that's a long game. And to go back to
physical manifestation of like the idea of personalized medicine using genomics. But like at this point, that's totally it. In some ways, it's almost like it's like you're dosing the intervention where, you know, pen and paper theoretical is like the 0.00. It's like the homeopathic dose. And then like the hard, like 3D printed, like, you know, a 1-to-1 replica is like, you know, the 1 gram, like full on dose, right? Like, so it makes a ton of sense to me. It's really cool. Yeah.
It's definitely been a wild and exciting journey, and you throw a pandemic on that, and then New Orleans got hit early, hard, repeatedly by the pandemic, and we were one of the first to face the brunt of the of COVID, and that forced, and you know, depending on, there were opportunities for innovation. You did some amazing work with surveillance, and we pivoted from anatomical modeling basically, if not overnight, in a week, to like, all right, how do we produce personal protective equipment? Because we didn't have access to that. So first it was like, oh, we'll 3D print a few, you know, face shields. And the beauty of bio design and being actually embedded in a hospital system like we are is the needs, we don't need to find the needs find us. And the stakeholders are there already. So everything from like, oh, this is too tight of a design to, you know, infectious control. You know, obviously we don't want to do any harm. You know, I don't want to put my colleagues or any patients, like, just for the sake of saying we did something. All right, so infectious control is there. The ICU physicians are there. The respiratory techs are there. The supply chain people are there to really verify, like, oh no, we don't actually have access.
And this is your group at Ochsner. What's the name of the group?
We live within Ochsner Academics, and the medical 3D lab, or the M3D lab, is the nexus for that. And you know, kind of what we were discussing, innovation is hard to quantify an ROI, but we've now become kind of this nexus of expertise that is hard, like less and less easy to just, you know, say it's, you know, not indispensable, because these supply chain things. We were hoping it was just pandemic related, but it seems to be persistent all across all verticals. But you know, definitely in healthcare, and we were able to produce things at scale. Medical barrier gowns were probably our biggest hit, interestingly enough, which was the furthest from our core competency. But there was a little bit of serendipity. One of our now they've moved on, but core lab members, the clinical research coordinator at the time, also had a boutique business. They understood textiles in a way that became very pertinent. And then the system kind of ran with it, the organization and the region. And this went beyond our lab, far beyond our lab at this point. But Louisiana and Southwest Louisiana opened up a PPE plant that actually just got FDA clearance to produce its own PPE at scale, not only for the system, but also, like, repatriating that. Just because that, you know, we all faced it. I think we can talk about it now, but there were some wild, uncertain times, unprecedented, at least generationally for us. And sometimes innovation is, I think, more and more driven by pain and fear than it is necessarily by, aspirations and ideals. That, I think all across the board really has driven a lot of innovation. At least there's a lot less people asking why there's a 3D printer in a hospital
Yeah.
than there were before.
No, that's really cool. And so, like, I love learning more about how other physician leaders and other systems kind of their groups kind of function within the organization. And it sounds like, especially during COVID, your group, and it's called the 3D medicine. Is that the name of your group, or sorry, what's it?
The medical 3D lab.
Medical 3D lab. So it sounds like during COVID, you kind of ran with it, and you were essentially like a fabrication shop for PPE. And before that, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the medical 3D lab was really the place for kind of 3D printing and like that, and everything to do with that type of simulation and kind of creation of 3D fabricated things. Does the medical 3D lab also, is that the like home of MXR as well within Ochsner, or are there others that do it as well? Like what's the delineation?
Yeah, I would say we're the nexus, and particularly medical extended reality, I'd say more than even additive manufacturing and healthcare has diffused, right? It's like it's clawing its way out of the valley of death. So there are now, you hear like clawing, still, and that's another reason that, it's such a timely, I think the AMXR can really help facilitate and expedite and catalyze getting us out of that valley. And so particularly with medical extended reality, you see it kind of popping up, particularly in our our pain management group, in our PEDS group, distraction therapy. So, we've definitely done work there. That's how Brennan and I were connected initially. And so I wouldn't say we own it. And like, I think that's the spirit of MXRA in general. It's like, it's almost like it's for all of us. We got to make it more, even more and sustainable. But in a way, we're the nexus of expertise within our lab as a developer focuses and is an expert on extended reality. Again, came from the gaming world. And we have a couple of engineers that really handle our anatomical modeling, which is sort of the engine. My clinical mission is functional optimization and community reintegration. I learned quickly there's a lot of interest from a research perspective, but from a sustainability perspective, particularly in the neurosciences, it's spine surgeries and it's neurovascular interventions that really, allow me to spend an hour with grandma to, for her dementia, or, GI Jane after a traumatic brain injury. So that has been our substrate, and we're quickly realizing as healthcare goes through these kind of difficult times, we also need to diversify, and we got to do it very thoughtfully, intentionally, leanly. But like where does medical extended reality play with visualization? Where does it play in digital fabrication? Where does it play in therapeutics? And there's a lot that you can do with a little, and particularly with a group like ours, like rising tides. I think that really seems like the mentality from my limited interactions with the new people, and then the people I've known for some time. It's definitely like we either rise together or we sink alone. And MXR has really ignited that kind of coalescing, and it's exciting to see and exciting to be a part of, and
that's
just really
great.
Want to commend you for taking the point.
Well, I want to just thank you because, frankly, the whole AMXRA thing wouldn't happen without support from folks like yourself and others. Every member is another kind of validating point for this whole space. So, the goal of this the whole Faces of AMXRA effort is really to not only make sure that we continue to highlight great kind of members like yourself, but also really tell a little bit about exactly like who each of us are, and show the diversity and just like the scope of what both people that are in the AMXRA, but also what they do with the technology and your interest. And I'd love to also just kind of, falling from that, what like are you hoping to get? Like, what's your hope with AMXR? I'm a palliative care doctor. That's my clinical kind of field. So like eventually every like interview, every discussion, whether it's like interviewing residents or fellows or like doing one of these, it ends up just being a hopes and wishes and worries kind of conversation. So we're in the hopes and worries transition. But what are you hoping to get and hoping for the first year of American Medical Extended Reality Association?
So my personal goal for the AMXRA in this first year is to have kind of punching above our weight representation from Southeast Louisiana, New Orleans, Southeast Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, the area. If I had to choose, and I'm interested in all of these things, but if I had to choose, this digital fabrication pipeline that connects, stereoscopic visualization, medical extended reality to advanced manufacturing, particularly after the experience of the pandemic and the persistence of it, of some of those symptoms and issues, it is digital fabrication. And
I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool. I'm not really like it's interesting. I'm definitely not an expert at this. I'm still learning every day, but the concept of digital fab using MXR as the tool as part of that pipeline for ultimately the creation of personalized, the Valhalla personalized kind of digital fabrication. Very, very
right.
cool stuff. And frankly, actually, this is actually quite timely. Most recently, I realized that one of the functions of Mighty Networks, which is what the AMXRA platform is, that wasn't actually activated, was the ability for members to create new communities. So initially, when this was configured, that didn't exist. Now, any member can create any community within AMXRA.
Oh,
So if you wanted
learn
to, I'm
something.
not saying you have to, but as you kind of continue to build out the community within Louisiana and New Orleans, I think that digital fabrication, that pipeline, is a really, really compelling one. So it's really cool.
It's still, I think, within healthcare, we're still getting our heads around it, but there's that pain and concern of 20th century rigid and kind of sclerotic supply chains, and what are we going to do about that? And not too dissimilar from 3D printing, you saw certain verticals adopt them early in a very practical and functional way, particularly aerospace and automated manufacturing. And you see that with extended reality as well. The Boeings and the Mercedes Benzes. All right, well, let's use augmented reality to facilitate fabrication, or setting up a factory, or doing maintenance, remotely. And so, it's always kind of cool to say you're the first, but also like having done this for a long time and getting kind of the ups and downs. It's like it's nice to see, like, oh, you sort of see the kind of the harmonization and kind of the sort of the rhythm. Like you see it happening in other places, and it's like, okay, it's not completely quixotic. And the other thing I will say, my goal for the AMXRA is, what's lacking in digital health in general is this rigor and this validation. I think we're getting better. We're getting professionalized in general in digital health, which encompasses so many things. And the AMXRA can really coordinate, because it takes a lot of work to do a little bit of research and validation. That's why there's so little of it out. Can we coordinate that? And, New Orleans, hopefully now, Southeast Louisiana, the Gulf Coast, Ochsner, may not come first to mind, even the people in our group. But having a venue so people have an awareness. And very recently, there's been a transformational gift to the neurosciences here at Ochsner to put up a brand new building, which is a really nice, defining, uniquely bullish event in an otherwise sea of bears. I'm riding her, definitely. I'll take the credit, but there's been some amazing leaders here, our CJ Bowie, Richard Zweifler, our philanthropy people have really led the way. And a lot declared, but a lot is to be declared. And, one of my hopes is in this new building to create a physical space to design, develop, validate, and then in a biodesign sense, integrate medical extended reality tools into healthcare delivery in a way that's
That's
real,
awesome.
not just and I feel like there's a hunger for, just like there's a hunger for an organization like AMXRA,
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
hunger for uh, a space, a network to help with that. And Oxford doesn't, I think Cedars is a prime example. It's going to take
Yeah.
a few hubs to really do that,
Yeah.
and then connecting these different, different places and different stakeholders in a way that can actually harmonize.
Yeah.
Is what it's going to take, and that's what that looks like a year from now. I'm not sure, and that's, I think, where you have these working groups. But I
Yeah.
would say in 5 years, that means like, okay, this is how you run a medical extended reality trial. These are the
Yeah.
places that you do it. These are the outcomes. This is, and Brendan and Omer at Cedars have really started laying that pathway
Yeah.
with their, with their VR framework, and seeing that professionalized and actualized and ruggedized in the next 24 to 60 months. And I think that's a role I feel the AMXR is uniquely suited to facilitate.
I like that you gave a range of 24 to 60 months. That's very generous, but I agree. I think that's, that's one of the reasons why we need to have a medical society, is to um, create, so that when people do this, you're not just in the woods alone. Now it's time, there are enough people in the woods. Now it's time to build the pathways and actually learn and
Absolutely.
create the white papers. And also, I just got to say, Oshner, at least from where I stand, like, we always look to Oshner as one of the more innovative organizations. I mean, like, I think I could probably buy a very nice meal if I got a nickel for every time I've heard someone talk about the OLab and
Mm-hmm.
the innovation work that Oshner is doing. So I'm not surprised that you guys are leading in 3D fabrication, and I really hope to be able to check out whenever you ultimately create the 3D XR kind of clinic slash, like, group of the future in the new tower. So that sounds really cool.
Yeah, well, you were supposedly breaking ground in 2 months, and it should be up and running in a couple of years. Obviously, a lot of things can happen, but the leadership is there. And to your point, the Oshner has really been forward thinking in a way that is, it's hard to do in healthcare because the margins
Yeah.
are so thin, the uncertainty is so
Yeah.
big. To take any kind of risk, is you really got to think twice, thrice, and the risks that have been taken, very thoughtful and intentional, um, have been, really done some amazing things and had a really impressive impact in an area that really needs it. We all need
Yeah.
it, but the Southeast, we're the buckle, the stroke belt. There's just such a need to figure out new, innovative, and effective ways to deliver care, because the way we've been doing it, like N+1 incrementalism innovation, that the math just doesn't last. It doesn't work
Yeah.
out. And so
Yeah.
how are we going to go from 0 to 1? And again, I think medical extended reality offers all kinds of opportunities that need to be validated, rigored, and ruggedized. Uh, but it makes sense to be leaning
Yeah.
into this space.
What do you think is, like, the most exciting, like, trend or thing in MXRA, like MXR today? Like, where do you think the signal is, and where should the field be going?
So I'll answer with two things. The practical part of me is so happy to see the validated randomized clinical trials, the grade A sushi kind of data coming out for medical extended reality and pain management,
Hmm.
in clawing us out of the valley of death, giving us opportunities that are non-pharmacological, non-narcotic, non-benzodiazepine dependent to treat pain and some mental health disorders. It's drawing capital, which is professionalizing the whole vertical, and it's validating it in a way where clinical people are like, okay, this just isn't some crazy sci-fi, Westworld thing that you're doing. And then sort of more, chasing windmills, there's a lot of growing evidence for psychedelics in mental health disorders. And, not necessarily politically, but as a field, we're conservative. So, so I don't know, even if the data was amazing with psilocybin, when there's going to be a department of psychedelics, in an area near me. And if medical extended reality can kind of replicate the clinical outcomes without necessarily having to use psilocybin, I think there's a lot of potential for end of life hospice.
And actually, it's funny you bring that up. My group, we're actually doing some of the research looking at psilocybin for end of life, like helping with anxiety and depression at the end of life. And it's actually some of the first legal studies in psilocybin since like the 70s or the 60s, when it became like a category, whatever, the no-go place, right? So it's exciting to see, definitely.
And that's where MXR, beyond the potential stigma of psilocybin, just the logistics, like you can deploy VR headsets to rural hinterland Louisiana in a way that if it's rigorous and clinically validated is not inferior, that I think it would, at least I think most people would agree, would be much more difficult to do with psilocybin, like the infrastructure, human resources, to support that in underserved areas where we need it the most. I think VR logistically or medical extended reality logistically has a lot of advantages there.
You're totally right. There's also another way. It's so interesting, like thinking about like the XR kind of therapeutic space, and what's interesting, I think, as a whole with kind of digital therapeutics is, you have, just like what we were talking about before, like these different kind of dosages of like digital kind of interventions, right? You have like from low dose homeopathic like videos to like PDFs to like, non-FDA cleared kind of like weight loss apps that you can just get on like the Apple Store or Google Play, to like, validated things that are prescribed. And then you have like this interesting kind of field of like these paired drug, like pharmaceutical plus digital intervention. And to me, what resonates, and someone should do this and then raise a ton of money once they navigate all the the legal kind of malarkey through it. But like, what if like from a you pair XR with like some kind of like lower strength legal kind of medication, medical marijuana or something like that, and you get the similar effect. It's chicory and coffee, right? It's extender, but also that'd be pretty interesting. That's pretty cool.
We've talked and met a couple of times, and that I didn't even know that, and that's again the value of having a professional society. You're part of I'm sure you're part of your other professional societies. I'm super active in the American Academy of Neurology. They played a significant role in my evolution, and I see the value of the American Academy of Neurology without a doubt. It's transformed my professional trajectory, and that's why we're preaching to the choir, but and medical extended reality is here to stay. It is something. We still got to define it. It's amorphous, but it needs a professional society to guide it, to have these conversations, and probably also make some hard decisions about where we want to focus,
Right.
because it's early days, and we're still out in the woods with not too many resources.
Yeah.
But having that dialogue
Yeah.
is going to be really valuable to making the most effective decisions about where to go and how to go about it.
To climb out of the trough of despair. That's right. All right. Well, I'm aware of the time. I want to get to like I want to make sure we're respectful for your time. So I do want to end with some just some base high level easy questions. Easy questions.
All right.
What's your current like XR like setup? Like what do you personally have? Do you use XR like personally or VR XR?
So I do, and I will say having 4-year-old, almost 5-year-old twin boys keeps me on point about that, and to kind of to the difficulty of getting adoption is if I didn't have those boys, even though I run the medical 3D lab, I'm medical affairs, clinical affairs for the medical 3D lab. I don't know how often I would be using the headsets. But to your point, I just got a Pico and Neo. I have an Oculus Quest, the original.
Cool.
And then in the lab itself, we have a variety of HMDs. We have a HoloLens. We have 2 looking glasses, kind of the enterprise holographic display.
Oh yeah, those are really cool. Yeah.
And we are finding situations where this I think is a tool, like at least intuitively, not just like I mean it's definitely the tour de force for our tours when like fancy people come by or whatnot. But we're seeing like true stereoscopy that can be done with multiple stakeholders at the same time. It's not perfect. There's a field of view and whatnot, but there's power there because again, going back to the cognitive neuroscience conceit, like you can really mitigate a lot of information asymmetry, particularly visual, when things are stereoscopic for us together. So like an engineer can have a conversation with a clinician while a patient is still there, and like it's so that is the tool I'm most mesmerized by right now, and trying to figure out ways where can we really find a way to show that there's utility about this over say just a web-based viewer or
super cool technology.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So in your personal life, and knowing that you have 2 5-year-old twins, my gosh, that's a lot of work. And the fact that you're awake is commendable. You're awake and clothed, at least top up. That's commendable with 2 twins.
The bar gets low when you got 5-year-old boys that don't like to sleep and like to play all day. But yeah.
What is your personal favorite use case for VR or XR? Like outside of the medical side, what do you think is the killer use case for XR at this point?
So kind of like recreationally hanging out with the boys, like 3D video, immersive 3D videos for whatever experience, like going to Jurassic Park, tracking down Roblox or whatnot is it makes it's Saturday morning cartoons on steroids, right? Like, like if I was a 5-year-old kid, and I don't even think Jurassic Park is going to date me, was out when I was a 5-year-old kid, but say it had been, and like I could just put on a headset and see the velociraptors, or go on the Magic School Bus or whatnot. Again, as a cognitive neuroscientist, seeing such plastic brains like being exposed in that way, it's really cool. It's like
really cool.
It may take our generation a second to get around to it. Maybe we never will. But I can tell you, my boys have no problem. They ask, like, all right, are the headsets charged? They know how to put them on by themselves. They're still figuring out how to like actually do the UI UX. But before you know it, they will be. And I'm sure when Apple comes out with their nifty headset, like my boys will be able to figure it out just like that. And then I think we underestimate what can change. We overestimate what will change in a year and underestimate what will change in 10. So that is that's what really keeps me hooked into the field too. Like,
it's it's fascinating you bring it up, and this is not an original idea for me. The only thing is, unfortunately, I like totally forgot who I stole this from. Although, in my credit, I did tell that person that I was gonna take it and make it my own. It might have been Kate Donovan. I'm not don't hold me to it, but we were talking, and and she had mentioned that we're all very kind of familiar with the concept of like now like the concept of digital natives, right? Like that's just like a
Yeah,
concept that we
digital
all
natives.
kind of
Mhm.
have agreed, like if you were born after like 1992 or something like that, you are a digital native. And she was the first person to bring up the concept of XR natives in my head, and like it just all of a sudden like clicked. You know what? It was not Kate. It was actually someone from HTC brought this up to me. But the
Hmm.
concept of there is going to be a cutoff where most likely people will just be comfortable with XR, and that'll be like they'll just be natives in this like XR kind of these use cases. And I think we're starting to see a little bit of that. If you ever go on like Horizon or big screen on Oculus, I mean, half the people there sound like they're like 9. So I mean, it's
Right.
like starting, right? Like I think to me it's pretty exciting and it's interesting kind of place to be.
And this is going to get kind of granular, but I think if there's anybody that ever even listens to this, they're going to be, fanboys and girls of extended realities. So seeing my boys, there's certain situations where they want to be completely immersed, and there's certain situations where they just want to play digital,
Yeah. Yep.
digital basketball, and it's just
Absolutely.
AR, no headset. And even seeing that, like I've always looked at VR and AR as sort of binary and different ends, just different. They're
Yeah.
binary, and
Yeah.
now I'm seeing it more as a spectrum with them as
Yeah.
endpoints. And you know, at some point, that is going to be a thing. Like, okay, I want some augmented reality, or need
Yep.
some augmented reality to complete a function. And no, like now I want to be completely immersed in Jurassic Park or whatever. And then, okay, I'm just want to be grounded in reality with no augmentation and no immersion. Like it's just going to be a spectrum and like a more analog, and you kind of turn the dial. And I see that with the boys, and
No, you're totally
it's
right. You're
crazy.
it's like the if digital is not a panacea, XR as a technology, as an umbrella of technology, is not going to be a panacea. It's just tools in a toolbox,
Right.
and depending on the use case, depending on the situation, so one tool will be better than others, and sometimes XR is not going to be the thing, right? Like
Right.
that's part of it. That's part of the game, right? Like you gotta know the use case.
Yeah. I've been going on 10 years in this space, and most of that has been what I'll call generously negative learnings. And
Yeah,
most of those negative learnings is like, this is not what you
this
need to be
isn't it.
using it. I don't know what
Yeah,
you're
yeah,
supposed to be using it for, but
yeah.
that's not
Not that's not it.
it.
Perfect, perfect. Well, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you for
Yeah,
being the
cheers.
first. Hopefully,
Appreciate it.
this will be the first of many. I don't know how often we're going to do this, but I'm not going to commit to anything because it's just going to be disappointment. But maybe like once a month or so, we'll have one. But
Yeah.
this has been a ton of fun. Thank you so much, Dr. Sarkar, and we'll see everyone on the feed. Thanks so much. This has been a production of the American Medical Extended Reality Association. Our mission is to advance the science and practice of medical extended reality through advancing care delivery, scientific investigation, innovation, education, advocacy, and community. If you are interested in learning more or joining AMXRA, please go to www.amxra.org to learn more. Bye now.